Brilliantly struck by David Cooper. Back with Wilkins. Absolutely magnificent from Ray Wilkins. Well with the header, but it's Durant again. The last chance perhaps for Rangers. A chance is on for goal. Shot makes it 2-apiece. Johnston, and he scored.
Against Cantona, nicely left there by Haitley, and here's the break on. It's Ian Durant, through to Haitley. McCoist on the far side. Gary Speed is racing back to provide the cover. Here's Ali McCoist. Oh, he's done it! Ali McCoist for Rangers.
Here's Gascoigne now. Can he produce some magic? Still it's Gascoigne. Oh yes! A tremendous goal by Gascoigne. It's been very evenly balanced. Here's Gascoigne now, pushing forward, showing great determination. Oh, he's done it again.
There's a slip by O'Neill, and Laudrup to win. Rangers look for a goal and get one in the 8th minute from Brian Laudrup. Celtic's wall is 5 strong, but Alberts gets it through. The hammer has torn Celtic apart.
It's Barry Ferguson. Oh yes! The captain shows the way. Here now is Neil McCann. Is there going to be a twist in the tail? Lovenkrands! Yes, there is! Peter Lovenkrands! It had to be him! He has surely won the Scottish Cup!
Like this, here's Davis, put in by Darshville. Davis! Darshville! They've nicked it! Away from home! Manchester, brace yourself. Rangers are coming!
Bit of stoppage time. Kevin Thompson's corner. It's Bagheera! Borat stops it. Boyd! Edu has put it in! Boris Edu! Right at the end!
There's no doubt Vice has made an impact since he has come onto the park. Jelavic is it back. It's Jelavic for Rangers! It's scored!
Jelavic on to Davis, and Lafferty's in already. He scored inside the first minute. Luco, definitely a threat. Still going. That is just brilliant. A goal for Luco. A goal for the fans. A goal for the cause. Here's Mackay. Barry Mackay. Looking to make it happen here. He might just do that. Right check! Deflected off Brown and in!
And Gulaci was missing, and there's Lundstrom! John Lundstrom with the goal! But here's Joe Aribo, a slip from Tutan. Aribo! A bolt from the blue! Joe Aribo!
Hi there, and welcome to everybody watching the live Wednesday Bulletin on the This Is Ibrox network. Just get the housekeeping out of the way first. Just always remember, give us a like and subscribe if you haven't done already on all the usual platforms. Anyway, today I am joined by Andrew Anderson. It's been a while, Andy. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. I say that. Still getting over a wee cold here, bit of a sore throat and all the rest of it like everybody's got it at the moment, but there's nothing like 90 minutes against Celtic in a League Cup final in 4 days' time to sort of throat out.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like 4 days' time, I'll tell you that. And Patrick Caskey, how are you doing today as well?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. Not yet, probably as nervous as I expected, but we've got a few days for that to bubble up.
Yeah, that's fine. It's good to see you on as well. I know the last time you were on This Is Ibrox, you were staking out Edinburgh Airport looking for all the signings coming in. So good to see you back to the day job again. Anyway, on today's show, we've got plenty to talk about. There's a couple of famous birthdays, which I know both guests are pretty keen to talk about both birthdays. A great result against Villarreal in the knockout stages of the Champions League. There's lots to dissect from the Michael Beale press conference. There was a couple of press conferences today. I don't think the Sakala one's officially been released yet. I know there's been bits and bobs in Sky Sports that we've all seen, but we'll get into what Borna was saying to it as well. We'll have a wee look at maybe the tactical side of things, how we expect Rangers to line up, how do we play differently than what we did the last time? Is there things we need to change from the 2-2 game? And obviously the sort of headline of the podcast is where or who plays in the midfield, because it looks like we may be a bit short. What are our options and who do we think is going to be good combinations with who? And if there's time, maybe there's an off the pitch article with Bisgrove, but only if there's time to cover that. We'll start with you, Andy. On this day in 2006, Rangers draw 2-2 at Ibrox in the last 16 of the Champions League, having been the first team in Scotland to qualify for the last 16. There was a couple of good goals that night from Villarreal, if I remember correctly. It was Riquelme and Diego Forlan. And I know a lot of people say that Riquelme, that performance that night, that's one of the best performances from an opposition player that they've seen from Ibrox. But there was also an own goal scored by Peña, no, not that one, and that amazing goal from Peter Lovenkrantz. What were your memories of that night, Andy? Were you there?
Yes, I was there. I was at that game. It was a fantastic night. Probably one of the loudest I've heard within Ibrox, to be honest with you. Possibly just surpassed the game against Inter Milan, which qualified us for the last 16. First Scottish team to get to the last 16 was a remarkable effort. And it was a smashing time to be a Rangers fan during that period. I remember Lovenkran's goal very well. It was fantastic. Am I right in saying we went 1-0? Did they go 1-0 up early on? Then we equalised, and then 2-1 to them. Then it was a very late own goal. Am I right in saying that? I think, if memory serves me, it was a late own goal. But to be there was absolutely fantastic. As I say, the last 16, it didn't get any better than that at the time. Only 2 years later, obviously, we got to the UEFA Cup final. But no, that was fantastic. And if memory serves me, was it one each in the return leg? One each in the return leg, but without and away goals. But Chris Boyd had a chance to clinch it. Am I right in saying that? That's just off the top of my head there now. But no, it was a fantastic night at Ibrox against Villarreal. But I really did enjoy the Inter game previous to get there, you know.
Yeah, it's one of those iconic images of it's almost like the Lundstrom celebration. They got the goal against Leipzig from Peter Lovenkrantz running away, just sheer ecstasy on a football player's face. And I think you're right. I think it was 1-1, wasn't it? Is that the game? Was it Ross McCormack or somebody like that scored for Rangers away over? Or am I totally? I'm sure somebody in the comments will pick me up on that. But there we go. And Patrick, to come to you, obviously there's a couple of birthdays today, big famous birthdays in the world of Rangers. The first one here is Shota Arveladze, who we wish his 50th birthday today. He signed for Rangers in 2003 from Ajax. He played 132 games. He played 57 times scored 57 times for Rangers, won 2 titles, 2 Scottish Cups and 3 League Cups. Including a pretty important and memorable treble in there. A player who was really, really fondly remembered from his time at Ibrox, if not especially when he got his dancing shoes on. You all know what that meant. But and he scored a really good goal in that Legends game last year. What were your thoughts? I know you're a big supporter and lover of Georgian football. What do you think about Shota Arveladze then?
No, I was going to say it's also his twin brother's birthday, who they get mixed up quite a lot. They do some sketches in Georgia and Turkey about it. But I was going to say the only goal I can actually remember him scoring, you got to me, was the header in last year's Legends game, which was emblematic of a lot of the goals he seemed to have scored watching YouTube highlights as well. But he's one of a few players probably who can actually say he's like an icon for individual clubs. I don't want to say he's a Rangers legend just because we had a lot of dialectical issues with the word legend this week, if anything. But I don't think anyone disagrees an icon. Also at Trabzonspor, Alkmaar and Ajax. Those are 4 like massive clubs. And Dinamo Tbilisi, where he started out. I mean, great player, probably one we could do with now. He obviously teamed up with Zurab Kanishvili to have a Georgian duo in the early 2000s. I, for one, I watch quite a lot of Georgian football. I know it is quite weird, but there are quite a few who we could perhaps rekindle into the new Shotas or whatever. But interestingly, I have a friend who works at Hull, and Shota Arveladze was their manager just until he got sacked a few months ago, and he never shut up about Rangers. So he still talks about it. So it's good to know that we've left an imprint in his heart. So people can rest assured that should he come back for the Legends game in March or in April when we're playing again, he'll probably come and score another header and enjoy it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think he's quite in that legend status, but he's certainly in that cult hero, because he's a guy I loved, and he played with a smile on his face, and he gave everything when he played for Rangers, and that's all you can ask for. Andy, I know this is going to be difficult to do. I want you to keep this, I was going to say short as possible, but anything under half an hour, I think we'll take at this point, because I know, having met you before and on this, that like you could talk for days about this guy. But the next guy is Brian Laudrup. We wish him a happy 54th birthday, which it kind of blew my mind that he's only 4 years older than Shota Arveladze when we're looking at it. But Brian joined joined Rangers in what seems to be an absolute steal of the century for 2.3 million after he had spells at Fiorentina, AC Milan and Bayern Munich. He played 150 times for Rangers, scored 44 goals in a blue shirt. He won 3 league titles, a Scottish Cup and a League Cup before he moved down to Chelsea. I open the floor to tell you what your memories and thoughts and feelings of a guy who's commonly referred to as God round about Ibrox.
There's so many memories, Kyle, of Brian Laudrup. Interesting to hear Patrick there swerve the legend. The legend word for under Shota Arveladze. That's an argument for a completely different time, but there can be no argument about Brian Laudrup. There can be absolutely no argument that he's a Rangers legend. Personally, when I think back to 9 in a row, a few players' faces come to mind, and that's Richard Gough, Ali McCoist and Brian Laudrup. And that's not because he scored the header at Tannadice to clinch the 9 in a row. It's because of his involvement for the 3 or 4 years, 94 to 98, I believe. The involvement with it all. He was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Now, I was thinking about it today when I seen it was his birthday, and you hear it around Ibrox, you hear it at away grounds. The Borna Barasic song, he turns and goes. I've yet to see a player live who could turn from a standing start, turn a player and go quicker than Brian Laudrup, with such ability, skill, fluidness. It was absolutely fantastic, and I feel privileged to be just over the age of 40, so I witnessed him live in my teenage years as such. I feel very, very privileged to say that, and there's absolutely no doubt he's a Rangers legend. I presume we've all seen the video doing the rounds today from was it the intro to 9 in a row, the video, or the DVD, but was it videos or DVDs back then? I can't remember. I'm really showing my age now.
Betamax, Andy, I think.
But not only seeing Brian Laudrup in that kind of montage, how animated Walter Smith was, I think, is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. That whole era, Walter Smith bringing him there. And we've all heard Ali McCoist talk about, he believes that we had Paul Gascoigne for the best bit of Paul Gascoigne's career. I probably agree with that, but we definitely had Brian Laudrup for the best of his career. I don't doubt that. He was absolutely fantastic. And the clubs he was at before, as you mentioned, Kyle, Bayern Munich, Fiorentina, AC Milan.
Yeah.
He went to Chelsea, then Ajax, I believe. Did he go to Ajax as well? Very briefly, albeit, I think, after Chelsea.
I think you're right, yeah.
So it just shows you the guy's ability. But no, you summed it up there, God. Probably isn't a strong enough word, and legend isn't strong enough to describe Brian Laudrup. You think of 9 in a row, you think of Brian Laudrup, and happy birthday to him.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. See, apart from that goal at Tannadice, what was your favourite Laudrup goal?
Against Celtic, it's got to be against Celtic, hasn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
It's got to be. Actually, I probably enjoy during that montage I just spoke about there. I think I enjoyed seeing him turning Celtic midfielders inside out, possibly more than I enjoyed him scoring the goal against Celtic. The one I'm talking about. I think it was just fantastic to watch him. I'm very privileged to say I seen him live. Obviously, you have to put your age in show there when you say that, but I'm happy to do it when you're talking about Brian Laudrup.
Yeah, 100%. I know we could go and fill the rest of the podcast talking about Laudrup or well, Andy could anyway. But we'll move on to things a bit more current, and we'll discuss the Michael Beale press conference that happened yesterday at Hampden. Don't worry, there'll be no awkward pictures and any supporters of the other side of Glasgow sitting next to any of us tonight, so that'll be fine. Patrick, I'll come to you first on this. Maybe a bit of an obvious question here, but there was something that I felt that he said was very interesting. Michael Beale highlighted that the League Cup, for some of the players in my squad, it's the one that's missing. How important is this League Cup for us in the sort of context of Rangers Football Club, given the amount of trophies or lack of trophies that we've won in the last few years at the top level? How massive a game is this for Rangers?
Yeah, it's a massive game. I think we need to caution on not making it sort of do or die, because if we big up to be the be all and end all, we might hear a few saying that Beale should be sacked or whatever if he doesn't win. But no, there is a point in which this is bigger than your average Scottish League Cup final, which is obviously the smallest of the three trophies. But at this point, we'll take whatever we want. Obviously, the importance comes from the fact that our barometer is always should be our past and based on how good we were in the past. But recently, and just naturally be with the team across the city in a contemporary status, and they've sort of outgunned us for the best part of like 15, 16 years when you look at it. In the part of sort of completing the trophy haul for someone like Tav or Goldson, that would be nice, but I don't think that that'll be sort of on the precipice of their mind. They'll just be thinking about pure numbers, and I don't blame them. I think perhaps it's most important in the context that this is Beale's first big test. I want to put that in quotation marks just because obviously any game, especially sort of like Celtic at home, Aberdeen away, Hibs away, Hearts away, are tests. But if you look at a sort of one with great caution and cautious in the sense that he kind of came to Rangers in November with limited pressure in the league. He was probably never going to win the league and he wasn't going to be judged on that. But the success in his first 6 to 8 months is judged on his ability to pick up trophies out with the league. And this is the first big challenge. You would think as well, given the fact that this is slightly later than it usually is. I think the League Cup last year and usually is in like December. It's before the winter break. That if you win this, you get real momentum in both the Scottish Cup charge and perhaps might add a tiny bit more pressure to Celtic in the ability that they may drop points. So I think it's more so important for putting numbers up, starting his reign with this sort of numerical marker. But I also think it is just as important in the fact that if we want to extrude all sort of pressure on Celtic in the league and look really good for the Scottish Cup, we kind of have to win this in a momentum sense.
Yeah, odd. I thought, memory serves me right, there's been cup finals that have been much later than what they were originally planned to be. I think there was one in particular that I remember that was about a year and a half after it was meant to be played, but we'll leave that for another time. Patrick, I'll stick with you on the next point here. The next thing that Michael Beale was asked about in the press conference, as per every blinking press conference that he's involved in, was the injury list. He says there's no real positive news. None of the boys have returned to training, so he's talking about Jack, Lundstrom, and Tillman. I think he sort of mentioned maybe Arfield was expected to come back a wee bit later on. I know towards the end of the podcast we will get into midfield combinations. Who do we think's best suited to what roles and who should play alongside each other? But what do you feel about this from Beale? Do you think this is a bit of smoke and mirrors, a bit of the old? Because I know it's something Walter Smith loved to do in his press conferences, but say he's injured and then he would be playing the next game. Do you think this is Beale showing a wee bit of experience, a wee bit of cleverness here, or do you think he is just being as honest as he always is in these press conferences?
No, I think if one thing is testament to sort of Michael Beale press conference experience as so far is honesty, almost to the point in which I see a lot of people thinking he should be media trained, which is quite funny just because I think we would be complaining, and we were complaining at length, or not me, but I guess if we talk about the communal or greater range sport, about the sort of lack in enthusiasm and honesty in the Van Bronckhorst interviews. So I guess it's a Goldilocks thing in which we want a bit of both. And I think it's only something people care about when we're not winning. So hopefully, could it be we win on Saturday, people won't be sort of microscopically dissecting his press conferences. But no, I do think it's him being honest. Obviously, there hasn't been a track record. I wouldn't say it's honesty in the sense, but there has been a few in the past, whether it be John Suter was supposed to play against, say, Johnston, or Lawrence was a bit closer, or Yilmaz was 2 weeks away, and the 2 weeks has gone and passed. I think it's more so on the basis of the sort of dynamic injuries they have. in which not all injuries have a set timeline, and small sort of mini tweaks that you think would only push someone back 3 or 5 days, which you might not need to disclose, just because if you told them 8 weeks and it's 8.5 weeks versus 8 weeks, no one's going to complain. But I think it's the fact that we have dynamic injuries in which people are consistently sort of picking up small ones. It's kind of symptomatic of injury-prone players like John Soto, sadly, and it seems like with Tom Lawrence, but that might just be hopefully isolated with this knee injury or calf injuries he's got. But no, I don't think it's gamesmanship. In the biggest sense, it could be for someone like Tillman or Jack or Lundstrom, who have been playing consistently the last weeks, and they might be touch and go, just on the basis that he might think that it sort of put it in the mind of more so I think the Celtic fans, because I don't think Ange and the Celtic coaching team are of the lack of quality in which they would sort of game plan for one eventuality and not put any thought into the other things. They've shown that they're a good coaching group, and I would hope that the Rangers coaching group would do the exact same, and I would expect them to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree there. It is interesting. I'll ask a similar question of you, Andy. Teddy Beer here says, I don't think Michael Beale plays those games, sadly. It's something that's maybe been levelled at him a wee bit, that he has come across at times as a wee bit inexperienced and given away a wee bit too much. Where do you stand on it all? Do you agree with Patrick in that he is, and Teddy Bears that he's not that type of guy, or would you not be surprised at all to end up seeing a midfield trio of Tillman, Raskin and Lundstrom or something like that?
I'm going to surprise you and go right down the middle and say it's a 50-50 chance with this one, Kyle, and I'll tell you for why. He states that he didn't come back to training today, and this was yesterday, and he expected them to be, and they're not going to be. He did then mention, he went on to mention that some of them might declare themselves fit near the time. You've got to remember it's a Sunday 3 o'clock kickoff. If they declare themselves fit tomorrow, can they get 2 days of training? Is that going to get them to 80% fit? Is it going to make them start? Possibly. So I think the news was true that he said, because I believe he is very, very honest. He has been honest. We've all said that. I think that's true, but I do think up his sleeve, he does expect a couple of them to be back near the end of the week. I think that's the way it's going to be. We won't know until Sunday, but I do think it's worth gambling on a potentially 80 to 85% fit John Lundstrom or 85% fit Malik Tillman. I think it may be worth a gamble. We'll get into that shortly, I'm sure. But as it stands, I think he was telling the truth yesterday, Tuesday. But I do think he expects them back prior to Sunday and for them to declare themselves fit.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. Curry Muncher here says, I'm not going to criticise Beale for being open. We spent last season screaming for info because we weren't told anything. Yeah, it's funny. I went and the other day, I went and watched a Van Bronckhorst press conference just to see what it was like back, and it's so contrasting. They're like 6-7 minutes long, just very, very Dutch answers, just straight to the point, no messing about, nothing really given away, and we can't complain if he is open and honest, because that's what we've been asking as supporters for years. Patrick, the next few points I'll come on in here, and I can see everybody in the comments, so I will go back and bring a couple of comments up here. But I know you were posting this on Twitter today, and you had some good stuff in the graphs comparing Roof to a certain forward at Celtic. Was it Kyogo Furuhashi, I think, maybe, just sort of indicating it. But yeah, he's injured again from all intents and purposes. I'm a massive fan of Roof, as I've said before in the podcast. I loved him when he was at Leeds. I saw him a couple of times at Leeds, and I still couldn't believe at the time when we signed him. I'm seeing quite a lot of comments about getting rid of him in the summer because of his quite sporadic availability. Where do you stand on this? Would you keep him till the end of his contract? Do you think he's a worthwhile asset to have around, even though he's got as much injury problems as he does, or would you let him go in the summer?
No, I would let him go, even for sort of no transfer fee. I think we're at the point in which it's diminishing returns, as so far as he's been fit for one and a third season of the 3 years. So I think, and obviously that came as the first one post-COVID. He had a prolonged break in between Anderlecht as well. So he's had plenty of time then to sort of get fit and ready to play. But yeah, I think he's also one of our higher earners, depending on how much validity you give to sort of shady reported salary websites you get online saying he's earning something like £25,000 or £27,000, which I mean, that sort of checks out in the fact that he was brought in as a starting striker on the basis that Morelos might have left to Lille that summer. But yeah, I think I would get rid of him, especially if someone was willing to offer us money, 100%. But I think we're beyond that. I think the sort of market you look at for Roof is sort of upper championship, and those clubs have become a lot more streetwise. We can't just sort of say a player name and we can throw them down to some sort of stupid English club, because there are sort of not that many stupid good clubs in the English Championship could afford him. When he's fit, he's obviously more than good enough to sort of be worth his wages and start for us. But the question is availability versus ability, and we're at the point in which we might see Morelos leave. So we're really going to have to sort of dig up the roots and set what we want for the next sort of 3 to 5 year period. And I don't think Roof, even if he does stay to end his contract, we're definitely not extending it. Even if he was to do on some sort of pay-to-play basis, which seems to be extinct at this point, he wouldn't be going forward. So if you can get him on some sort of wage cut off in the summer, I think you do so.
Yeah, I definitely shouldn't have admitted that I rewatched Van Bronckhorst press conference. I'm getting absolutely pandered in the comments, and quite rightly so. That's the last one I'll ever watch, and I did it for the good of the podcast, and nobody should go back and watch them again because they are quite boring. Andy, I asked you the exact same question there. I'm genuinely surprised, Patrick, that you said that you would let him go, given that when he is fit and he plays, he scores or he gets an assist or something that, you know, especially he's super important. There's maybe an argument we're not in this final against Celtic if he doesn't come on against Aberdeen. Where do you see Roof? Is he a guy you would have keep at the club despite his injury problems?
No, probably not. Not anymore. I'm scunnered, for want of a better expression, with it all. Kyle, the Aberdeen semi-final kind of sums it up. You know, comes back to a return, scores a goal, gets injured, and you don't see him for a few weeks again. It's looking very likely that it's going to happen again if the rumours are true. So we'll see what happens come Sunday. But there's no getting away from how effective he is. He's absolutely fantastic. He's possibly got the best movement of all the other strikers, Morelos and Cholak and Roof. I think he's got the best movement. He's the most kind of agile, if you like. I think back to Braga last year, he scored about 9 goals that night. Only one of them counted. It just shows you how important he is, you know. But you can't be paying somebody that kind of money if rumours are true again to play one game in every 8 or 9. It's unacceptable for Rangers. The only thing I will say is it would be more than frustrating to see him go down south, you know, back down south to a championship level team and have a season or two injury free. It would be more than frustrating, that would, because I do value him. I do think he's a fantastic player and a fantastic asset if fit, and that's the key, if fit. If Sunday proves to be true that he's not going to be involved or he can't be involved, I'm sorry to say it's time to go.
Yes, I think everybody in the comments are agreeing with both you guys. I think maybe I've just got the Roof blinkers on and need to take them off for a second. For what it's worth, I would keep him in and around the club despite him being a high earner. Because if you look at, you know, there's going to be players that are out of contract and we're going to shift on to the end of the season. So I think there will be a fair amount of money to have for using in wages at the end of the season. Rangers on tour here jumps up and he says Roof is like Ryan Robson, amazing player but just cursed with injuries. I think that's a fair comparison. Andy, I'll stick with you in the next point here. It's just, you know, to finish in the press conference, Beale talked, you know, I love him when he talks about the Scottish game. He's one of the few managers that I feel really talks it up. Talk magnificently about the rivalry, and obviously he's experienced some big rivalries across world football with his time in England at Liverpool and Chelsea, and when he was over at Sao Paulo as well. Do you think that we're selling ourselves a wee bit short here? I've seen quite a few people criticising you know, the kickoff time, 3 o'clock on a Sunday, clashing with the rugby. I know nobody here will care about the rugby, but yeah, just surely we've got to be doing a wee bit better to promote our game a bit more.
Possibly, I think probably that's true, Kyle. Beale does a good job of that. Beale talks very highly of Scottish football and the Old Firm game. He spoke about that very respectfully. I thought he mentioned 2 or 3 times during this whole press conference just how much quality's in the Celtic team, and how much quality's in both teams and how much of a spectacle it can be, and the colour that will be involved. I did find it interesting, though. I don't know the journalist's name, but they were pressing him quite forcefully on, first of all, the rivalry, and he answered it very diplomatically, I thought, as he always does, and honestly. But that wasn't enough for said journalist who then decided to ask him what the fans thought of each other. What do you want? Just a headline you're wanting here? Do you know, just a soundbite? That's obviously always wanting. Beale handled it absolutely perfectly, as he always does. The kick-off time, 3 o'clock on a Sunday. I would like to be a wee bit earlier, but that's a selfish reason. I would like, nothing to do with the rugby. I do enjoy the rugby. But it's more to do with the fact that it's another 3 hours to kill. Normally it's 12 or half 12 for an Old Firm game, and the time you get up and you get organised, you see the team. You've not got long to go, until you get to sit down and watch the game. Just another 3 hours. So selfishly, I would rather it was a wee bit earlier. But I don't know how much more Michael Beale can do to talk up our game. I think he does very, very well. And I'm very surprised at you, Kyle. I know you've done it for the good of the podcast, going over one of Gio's press conferences, but I struggle to think if I watched one start to finish the first time round, let alone going back over it. Michael Beale's in a completely different kettle of fish to that. And it's very refreshing, I think. I know a lot of folks say he's too honest, but when you're wanting somebody to be an ambassador or champion your club, he's the perfect man. I do laugh at his accent, though. He's sometimes certain words he comes out with, he's almost like Mickey Flanagan. He's so it's absolutely priceless. Certain words, it's very similar to Peter Lovenkrands when he talks about Rangers. He talks with an accent, obviously. He flings in the odd Scottish word. I think Michael Beale's a wee bit like that. But no, I think the game could be talked up a bit more. It could be more prevalent, perhaps earlier or on a Saturday. But if you're wanting somebody to talk up the game, Michael Beale's your man.
Yeah, 100%. Patrick, I'll come on to the next wee point here. It was Borna Barasic had a go in the press conference today. The man with the deepest voice in Scottish football. I feel like I've got to turn the volume all the way up on my headphones whenever I'm listening to him. But he appeared to be quite confident, which was good to see. He's a player we all know. He's one of these guys that is a confidence player. If he's full of, believes in himself, we can really see the best of him. How important do you think it is that it's good that we see a confident Borna Barasic going into the game on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean important because I think obviously the last 2 years we've probably been more games where we've been worse than Celtic than better, and that's sort of emblematic by the scoreline and whatever sort of metric you want to use. I think Borna Barasic has probably been one of the poorest players, especially in the consecutive 4-0 defeats both in January 22 and August 22. It's that him and who's ever in goals was John McLaughlin and Alan McGregor split the 2 games, and he's been really poor in those games. Obviously, he's in the last 2 months sort of brought his form up to something more sort of recognizable in the sense of like the 2019-20 season, the 2021 season. It's still not the perfect option. I just think there's a sort of natural tension between his game and what Beale wants, but it's fine. We're sort of making do square pegs in round holes, and he's doing really well as a square peg in a round hole. As for Celtic, I think he needs to, the only way he comes out of the game playing well is if he does more on the offensive game than that he allows his sort of counterpart winger, who I don't know who will actually play on the right for Celtic, because they do like to sort of change it. Probably be Dyson Maeda, you'd expect, on the basis that he was pretty good in the January firm. He's been quite good. But then Abada also gave Barasic a hell of a time in past games. So I think that would probably be one of the questions in which if we were a Celtic podcast, thankfully we're not, that you'd probably discuss. But I do think he'll probably struggle defensive regardless of who it is. I think even against a sort of just slightly above average winger, he's not the best. So when you get against one who's very good, admittedly, he'll struggle even more so. But I think if he manages to sort of counteract that by putting in some good crosses, because he really does live and die by the cross. If Barasic plays well, he crosses the ball well. And if he plays poorly, he crosses the ball poorly. So if he's confident, he's always one who's sort of stoked the fire in the crowd. I remember when we played Young Boys at home in the last game of the group stage in 2020, he goes up to the Young Boys crowd and sort of gives them some gestures. So that's sort of emblematic of the fact that he enjoys it and he enjoys these sort of games. So hopefully we see the confidence flow throughout the 90 minutes and it doesn't waver, because obviously we need to be a confident team to get the best out of it.
Yeah, Andy Craig, Andrews here says everyone of our team should be going into this game confident, but it won't be easy. Completely agree with that. It's always good to see a confident son of the Moth when he's going into these things. Something that was mentioned quite a few times in both press conferences was in regards to the final in 2019. We all know about that, the offside goal. But they were talking about using that, the loss and the hurt from that, as a kind of to motivate themselves from this one. Do you think that's a good source of motivation for the squad and the team?
I think so. I think it has to be. Especially Michael Beale mentioned in his press conference that box to box Rangers were fantastic that day, and that's true. You think of the missed opportunities Morelos had, missed penalty. The game was there to be won. It should have been won, so box to box, he's on the money. They were fantastic that day. So to lose it in such a manner, I think they're going to have to use it as a wee bit of a kick on from that. But that said, it's a completely different Celtic team I think you're going to see. You know, it's going to be a lot more similar to January, just gone January the 2nd there. I think it's very important that, first of all, we start well. I think that's the most important thing. We didn't start well in January. Michael Beale mentioned that. We could have started a hell of a lot better. And to this day, I mean, the debate around James Tavernier will be ongoing, and it's not something I'm going to get into tonight. But that ball in the first 4 minutes should have been in beside me in the East Enclosure. It was 70-30 his ball. Maida shouldn't have won it, and they went on to score. Interestingly, and I think as a positive, Celtic are known for scoring early and going on and kicking on and giving teams doings, ourselves included, once or twice. That didn't happen, so that shows the mentality which Borna Barasic mentioned in abundance in his press conference. The mentality to go 1-0 down early to Celtic and bring it back, and albeit end up drawing the game and only taking a point, I think, rather sadly. So no, I think 2019 must use that. They must use that. A lot of the same players are there, and that game was left out there on the pitch and should have been won. Such were the chances, and I think Morelos, Beale, Barasic, Tav, they'll all use it, and so they should.
Yeah, 100%. I'll stick with you on the next few point here, Andy. It's how important do you think Barasic will be on the team on Sunday, given that, for me, I think he's been one of our most consistent players, even looking back at the GVB reign at the start of the season. He was putting in good numbers. I think he has got the most amount of assists. I think he's on like 10 assists for my left back, which is again pretty good. He scored 2 goals, which is, I think, is equalled his best ever tally for Rangers in a season as well. Do you see him as being an important player, given that if he doesn't, go into himself and it's somebody that we need to utilise against Celtic?
Yes, he's important for 2 reasons. Number one, he's got to start well and play well. And if he starts well and plays well, the cross that he's got on him is going to be very, very important. There's no secret that Carter, Vickers and Starfelt, they'll start at centre-half for Celtic. You're going to have somebody with pinpoint accuracy with a ball coming in there, and Barasic can do that. Secondly, he's going to be important because if it's not going our way, he tends to shy away from it, I find. A lot of people give him stick for a couple of things that have happened. Patrick alluded to it, and quite rightly so. I think he's done enough to earn back the respect and the support of the fan base, and I think he has, definitely, largely anyway. But he's going to be very, very important. Both sides, I think, are going to be important. Both fullbacks are going to be very, very important. Barasic for his crossing and Tavernier for his going forward, I think it's going to be very important. If you can get 4, 5, 6 balls in from Barasic, 2 of them quality, we need to make them count, and I think that will be very important. Tavernier the same on the other side, but he's got to start well. I've never seen Barasic start a game poorly and come on to a game. I think he's got to start well and keep it going from there, and he just keeps going and going from there. Yeah,
I totally agree. Patrick, Andy brings me on to my next point quite nicely. Keen to get your thoughts on this, because when Beale came in, this was something that I thought that he would make a bit more use of. I think we've maybe seen a bit more of the fullbacks, certainly compared to GVB. But how have you felt that Tav and Barasic have been under Beale? I was maybe expecting them to be a bit more further forward when they've been playing, or I'm sure you'll tell me. How do you think the two of them will play at the weekend?
Yeah, I don't think we'll see much deviation. I think even between the three managers we've had in the past 4 or 5 years. The sort of changes have been tweaks, if that, and I guess the starting position, what they do out of possession, and sort of what ability to roam. I think what we've seen with Beale come, anecdotally, we've seen the sort of classic one of them in the corner and the other one in the penalty box style, usually Borna Barasic and then Tavernier in the penalty box. We've seen that a few more times. That went missing completely against Van Bronckhorst. I don't think you can say that's a bad thing, because I don't think many coaches would set up their team to have their fullback as a penalty box receiver whilst the other crosses the ball, but it's good for us. The more men in the penalty box, the better. As for this game, I don't think it's that important. I don't think the game will be won or lost by our fullbacks, just on the basis that Celtic's wingers are going to push our fullbacks back quite a bit as well. It'll be a game of cat and mouse on both. I think that the wings are perhaps equally stocked from both teams, especially given the form. Barris is playing well. Tavernier is very good. Obviously, Greg Taylor is playing really well for Celtic. I don't know who's going to play right back for them. That might be a big question, and hopefully Kent, whoever he is facing up to, will get the better of them. But equally, Celtic's wingers are very good. So I think the game won't be won and lost there. I think the momentum and who's able to push each side back and forward on the wide channels will be important, but I think there's sort of, in most derby games, you see sort of the injury room in the central sort of channels and half spaces where the game is won, especially for a Beale side who likes to invert his sort of wingers and make them play quite narrow, and for a Celtic side whose fullbacks in possession almost play like centre midfielders, how they invert. So I think obviously it would be nice to see Borna or Tav get a goal from out wide, and for us to be reminded about how well stocked we are in our fullbacks and how they are such a sort of mass in terms of creating chances and stuff like that. I think they both have our highest assists and expected assists out of any players, which is great. And I think they're 3 and 4 in the league in total. But I do think, as we'll allude to later, the centre midfield situation is probably more dynamic and sort of cautionary to a win or a loss.
Yeah, totally back that up as well. And the Rangers on tour here has a wee point. Ben Davies is crucial. Goldson and Borna trust him. Shows you how important it is to have a balance at the back. I think I agree with that. It's good to see, that the difference it is having a left-sided left centre half there. But it's been no coincidence that the back 4-5 have been fairly settled since Beale came in. We know that he said that he rushed Goldson back maybe a wee bit from his injury but it's been super important. It's not been a coincidence that Rangers have been such a good run of form, and the back 5 have been virtually the same, apart from the goalkeeper in most games.
Definitely. I've been crying for we've all been crying for a settled back 4 or 5 for God knows how long, and we seem to have it now, and they seem to be doing reasonably well. Sometimes I think we can be a wee bit rabbit in the headlights sometimes, but I think that's more to do with how often we have to defend. Sunday's going to be different. Sunday we'll have to defend a hell of a lot more than normal. I did look at the stats from the game in January the 2nd there, and Celtic had 64% possession, something like that, but we had more shots on target and more shots overall. So they're definitely doing something correctly. And I think it's interesting to see the partnership between Goldson and Davies develop, and I'm thoroughly enjoying seeing that develop. I know we've got Suter and we've got Helander and we've got King there, but even if they were available, would they put these two out of the team? I really don't think so. They're going to be very, very important on Sunday. Michael Beale alluded again in his press conference to the fact that the games they've played lately, he was talking mainly about Raskin and Cantwell, I suppose, that we've had most of the possession, and Sunday will be different. And it will be, he's exactly right, it will be different, and we're going to rely heavily, I think, on Goldson and Davies, especially the reading of the game. It's going to be very, very important.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Patrick, I'll come to you in the next wee discussion point here. I think it was something that we've mentioned earlier on in the podcast, and Brian Laudrup in one of his articles in the newspaper said that Rangers have got to utilise the pace of Kent and Sakala. Is this something that we need to look at, given that I felt that Sakala, especially in the game last year at the end of the season away to Parkhead, when he got his goal, he was superb and really caused them issues when he came on. And same for Ryan Kent. You look at the goal that he scored in the last game, that came from him attacking out wide, using his pace and a fantastic finish. Do you see this as something that we'll utilise against Celtic at the weekend?
Yeah, I would definitely bet on that being the starting wing pair. Sakala, I think, has probably been the best Rangers performer in the sort of post GVB and even in Van Bronckhorst era Rangers. You saw obviously he didn't score, but he forced Starfelt for the own goal in the cup semi-final last year. He got 2 assists in January and he scored against Celtic in last April. And I think sort of his chaotic nature engenders sort of chaos in the Celtic penalty box. It's interesting, even though Hart, Starfelt, and especially Starfelt have played for so long together, they are still prone for communication mishaps. I think you saw that against Aberdeen as well. It's also emblematic of their lack of ability on the ball, which is surprising given how much possession they are seeing, but they're kind of coddled with the rest of the system allows them to do that. But Sakala especially, I think Kent, given the fact that Taylor is good on the ball, but he's a physical misnomer in the sense that he just has sort of very average physique for the SPFL, not even for sort of European level. So Kent will hopefully be able to take advantage of that in a sort of pace and strength aspect. Sakala less so, especially if Johnson plays. Johnson is really quick and has great stamina. Ralston less so, but I'd assume Johnson will play. So the physical matchup there will be less favoured than the left side, but I still think Sakala is the more dynamic athlete than Johnson. So from a pure athletic POV, we should probably take advantage on the sides, but also on the fact that both are good dynamic runners, like to cut in. Kent also finally got another goal against Celtic. He obviously started his Rangers career against Celtic really well. Obviously the classic goal at Parkhead in 2019 when he scores late, and obviously we end up losing that game sadly. But he has then reignited his sort of form with that goal in January, and he looked great. He's also looked a bit better in the past few weeks. And Sakala as well, it's not just, it used to be he would play well, play not very well, but now he's sort of consistently sort of embedding, putting together and threading these performances. And I think post Beale appointment outside of Tillman, he might be the best player and probably certainly the best member of the front three, I would say. So I think those two will be important, but with any game against higher quality opposition, it's about sort of breaking the central lines and getting the ball to them and giving them the proper artillery to then fire.
Yeah, exactly. Both those players will be really, really important against Celtic, especially Sakala. I really hope he does. I've got a wee feeling that he's just going to do something. He's due. I say he's due a goal. He scored whatever it was, 5 or 6 goals in the last few games and had quite a few assists as well. So I'm just expecting one of these ones where everybody's get their head in their hands and then he's left foot, right foot, bang, right in the top corner. Andy, the next point to discuss, and I know there's been lots of chat about this on social media, is how the sort of centre of the park is going to be against Celtic at the weekend. Obviously, we had alluded to earlier on that Jack Lundstrom and Tillman maybe not be fit for Sunday. What's your thoughts on that midfield three of Cantwell, Raskin and Kamara if they do play? Raskin and Kamara in particular, it was a bit of a mixed bag the last podcast I was on, or whenever we were talking about the Livingston post-match. Some people seem to think that Kamara didn't have a good game. I personally felt that him and Raskin complemented each other quite well.
I agree with that, actually. I thought they did do okay. But when it comes to against Celtic, I would like John Lundstrom to be fit, I'll be honest with you. I would like to see a midfield of Tillman, Raskin and Lundstrom. And the reason is January. I thought Lundstrom was fantastic in January. And when he went off, we sat back a wee bit deeper. Like Callum McGregor, more time in the ball. And that's when the kind of flow changed near the end of the game. The second half, we came out, the traps flying. Sakala had a big bit to do with that. Ryan Kent, obviously, as Patrick just said. But I think Lundstrom was very important in that as well. Kamara, I would love to see Kamara. Tynecastle Kamara, yes. But other Kamaras, possibly not. He's too hot and cold for me in a game. A cup final, I think, is obviously very important. I would like to see Raskin and Lundstrom with Tillman, but that's obviously injury dependent. Jack, I don't. If there's one of them not going to make it, it's going to be Ryan Jack. Let's face facts. We're used to Ryan Jack's injury woes. A lot of folk do. I was talking to my friend this evening. He says he would play Raskin and Jack in front of the defence. You know, as a kind of holding midfield players, I would play Raskin and Lundstrom. I don't know what Patrick thinks, but I just don't think we're guaranteed Tynecastle Kamara. I think we can be hot or cold. You know, if we were guaranteed Tynecastle Kamara, it's a no-brainer. He's in there. But I think it's a game for John Lundstrom.
Yes, if he's fit, I don't think I would have any qualms about that. Love to get your thoughts on it, Patrick, especially Nicholas Raskin since he came in. I know he was a player that we all were delighted when he came in, but I know he's somebody that you'd been highlighting for the past sort of 18 months before he joined. How have you felt that he's settled into the squad so far, even though he's only played a game and a half or a couple of games or something like that? But he really seems to suit the profile that Rangers need in terms of that snappiness, in terms of what I've been impressed with watching him is when he gets the ball, wins it back, his first thought is to look up and he drives forward, and it could be something really key. First of all, that, and who do you think out of all the midfield players that we've got would complement him the best, sitting in that sort of two in the sort of holding midfield role?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the early signs have been overwhelmingly positive in reference to Raskin. I think he's probably transitioned what we saw in Belgium, especially this season, immediately, which was always going to be a big question given the fact he hadn't played pre-World Cup. So he's obviously he's a professional footballer. He was doing tons of training. I think he was with the B team laterally on the basis they were trying to freeze him out, but even just personal training. But it's 2 or 3 months without sort of competitive A-team football. So there's going to be a question if he could come in and do it immediately. And he has. He's fit in really well. Glove-like. I know it's a sort of cliche, but he has been quite glove-like. To be fair, he hasn't played the greatest of teams so far, but obviously this will be the big test first up. And he said in the press earlier in the week that he's looking forward to it. He loves playing in big games. We've seen it in Belgium. There's it's a more balanced league in which you have 5 or 6 very good teams, and he's always put up when playing against the likes of Club Brugge, Genk, Anderlecht, and so on. I would definitely play him, barring any injury. Hopefully not. I think we have enough injuries to deal with, but I definitely play him as the sort of 8, so the sort of more advanced player in a double pivot. I also ideally play Tillman as my 10, but if he's not there, I'd play Cantwell. But I would only play Cantwell if Tillman isn't fit, just because I think Cantwell on the wings is less effective than either Kent or Sakala against Celtic, for example. And then as a 6, I think I would play Kamara personally. I understand why someone would like Lundstram in this. If you think of sort of the big highlights of what Lundstram has provided when he's been good in the last 18 months, which to me hasn't been enough to warrant him starting, but he's sort of the more classical, what we've seen in yesteryear for Rangers in the old firm, the more battler, larger, dogged, perhaps more physical outright, in which people think, and rightfully so, will need to sort of win the game by battling. And I understand that, but I think just given how Celtic set up, their midfield isn't mighty behemoths. It's more so technical players who probably get Hatate, O'Reilly, and McGregor or more thrown in there. I think Kamara's skills are perhaps more appropriate. I do understand Andy's hesitations insofar as Kamara has been quite inconsistent, but I think the game is one on the ability to retain the ball and break the lines and move from the sort of middle to final third. And I think Kamara offers far more than either Jack or Lundstram in that capacity. But I also wouldn't blame someone if you want the Lundstram sort of go and kick someone, because that'll rattle a team up. And as much as it is sort of old-fashioned, that's a really good way to build momentum, is sort of get that first tackle in.
Yeah, 100%. There's nothing that gets an Old Firm game going like a tackle. I think the go-to, the gold standard for that is Kevin Thompson on a certain Mr. Keane that we all love, and we could watch that a million times back. Next question here, Andy, is we've already talked about Jack Lundstram and Tillman. Say they're not 100% fit. Say Beale alluded to it in his press conference. He says he feels that he might get a couple of knocks at the door, saying, I'm fit, I'm ready for it. Would you play any of these guys at sort of 80%, 70% fitness, or would you just not risk them at all in a game like this? Lundstram being the one in particular, I think he's maybe the one that out of the 3 that maybe back before, given that we all love him. We've seen him what he did when in the Old Firm game at Hampden before, when Bassey was going over and he absolutely snapped at him. We need players like that in Old Firm game, because it becomes a bit more at times than ability. It's about the mentality. Would you risk these guys in a game like that?
Yes, Lundstram. Yes, I would. I definitely would. Michael Beale will have a number in mind. X percentage fit. Is it worth flinging him in there? He's basically made it known that the league is probably out of his reach. He's mentioned it a few times now that it's 9 points of a difference. It's the same as it was. He hasn't cut it, but that's because of the form of both teams. It's been absolutely identical. So I think, yes, he should and will risk like Lundstram. When it comes to the number 10, Patrick said Tillman. I totally agree with that. I think that would have to be 80 to 85, 90% fit. Or is it going to be Cantwell in there? Cantwell, I think, is wasted out in the right hand side, and I think that's a place for Sakala anyway. The front three will be Sakala, Kent, Morelos. It's as simple as that. So the number 10 is either Tillman, Cantwell or Hadjis, and if it's not Tillman, it will be Cantwell. So there will be a number in mind, and I think Tillman will be a higher percent than John Lundstram, but I think it's very important that you get John Lundstram onto that park. However, if you do play a 70% fit John Lundstram and it doesn't work, that's the sword that he lives and dies by. But I think it is probably going to be worth the risk, and as you say, it's worth the mentality with it. Okay, there will be some good football and show. The two top teams in Scotland are playing a cup final, so there will be good football and show, but the mentality matters sometimes more, and John Lundstram will put a tackle in that will get the crowd going and get the team going. And I think we went 1-0 down in the semi-final last year. He was very heavily involved, and then shortly after Arfield scored, and then the rest we all know. So I think it's quite important to get Lundstram as close to fitness as possible, and I think there will be a number, and Michael Beale will go with it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. A lot of people are agreeing with what Thomas H is here saying. I hope it's Jack, Raskin and Tillman. It's between Tillman and Lundstram for Jack and Lundstram for me. I think we've got to have one of the two of them. We know Jack loves a goal at Hampden anyway, so for that reason alone, I'd be sticking him in there.
So would you rule Kamara out altogether then, Kyle? Unless necessary.
Yeah, unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't think I would be going and starting Kamara in a game like that. As you said, it's just if we were guaranteed to get Hearts Kamara or Tynecastle Kamara, as you called him, I would have no hesitation in starting him at all. But in games like this, more often than not, I'm saying I don't think Rangers need to play with two defensive midfield players. A game of this magnitude, I think we are a bit more suited to having two like that. And even at that, as Patrick said, Raskin's not, he is defensively minded, but he plays that ball forward quickly. I asked this exact same question to you, Patrick. Would you be risking I've no idea the metrics. See, when I say that 70% fit, 80% fit, I've no idea how you would measure that at all. But say these guys aren't 100% fit, would you risk them in a game like this?
It depends. With someone like Tillman, if he's less than 80% fit, I keep him from the bench because he can come on and sort of provide a burst. I think with Lundstram, he lives and dies by his ability to cover the pitch. So if he's less than 80%, I just wouldn't risk it. I also think the fact that you're also sort of also leveraging risk in the fact that he's been quite inconsistent recently. He's had some great games, Hearts away. Lundstram was great, but he's also had some games which he's been really poor. And it's almost like a myopic style in which a lot of his passes would then lead to one of our players getting yellow carded. I think there was a running tally in which that's like 6 or 7 times this season. He's played a pass and it's been misplaced and someone else has got a yellow card. But I do understand the fact that regardless of whether Lundstram comes with a good application of his technical ability, he will try. And I guess a lot of people like that because they want to see from their football team what they would do. If they were on the pitch, they'd run their heart out. So they like to see the fact that someone is visibly running about and doing that. But I do think if Lundstram is at 100%, I think a lot of the charm for him, especially in a game like this, especially vis-a-vis someone like Kamara, who's more technically sort of applicable in this situation. And even Jack, who I think has a better skill set than Lundstram. But so if Lundstram isn't able to sort of extrude his peak efficacy and fitness, which is probably what his greatest thing, his biggest calling card in this situation, and he pointed out really well, the semi-final last year in April, he was pretty much everywhere. And that was largely down to his sort of iron lungs at that time. So with Lundstram more important than Tillman, I think if he's not at least the sort of arbitrary 90% football manager green bar for fitness, I wouldn't play him because I think he loses a lot of his charm. But for Tillman as well, if he's not 100% fit, I just leave him on the bench and sub him on when needs be because he's probably one of those players sort of long-term. And if he comes on, gets a long-term injury, he might be a bit miffed with how he's been dealt with the injury sort of stuff and his fitness, and that might put him off extending, let's say, when the loan ends. I think we need to have sort of kiddie gloves in the fact that we need to appease him as much as possible on the basis of hopefully luring him here permanently in the summer.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I'd be a bit more confident about playing guys that had niggles and stuff like that if the Hampden pitch wasn't such a cow field, to be honest with you. It was interesting sort of seeing it in the background of some of the shots from the press conference yesterday, but it didn't look much better than what it was for the semi-final against Aberdeen. At least we are going playing on it, and it will be the same for both teams. That is the best thing I can say about it. We're coming up for the hour mark, so we will wrap up shortly. Andy, there's one last wee point about the midfield I'd like to come on to, and it's who do you think will play in that sort of number 10 role? Or who your preference would be? A couple of names, obviously we've talked about it. If Tillman's fit, I think he would be my choice for sitting in there. But we know Cantwell's played. He seems to have sort of been developing quite a good relationship with Raskin. I've seen a bit of bromance on Instagram between the two of them. But who do you see sitting in that sort of a bit more advanced position in the midfield?
I think Tillman. I think I would like to see Tillman in there. A very good friend of mine, soon to be an ex-friend of mine, doesn't rate Malik Tillman. He says he goes missing in the big games against Celtic and things like that, you know, and it's going to come to blows very shortly. He'll know exactly who I'm talking about if he is watching. I do rate him. I think he's fantastic. We're going to need somebody with his creativity, I think, his drive, his composure. That said, if he was a wee bit more composed, we would have won the game in January 3-1 if he just pulled the trigger a fraction earlier. So I think Tillman, and if it's not Tillman, it's going to be Cantwell. I think it's probably came too soon for Hadji. He's building himself back up to fitness, and he's definitely going to be a Rangers player and a good Rangers player in the future. But I think this one's came too early, so I think it will be Tillman or Cantwell, and heading a vice, Tillman.
Yeah, and final question to you, Patrick. Who would you have sitting in the sort of advanced midfield role for Rangers? Do you agree with Andy that if Tillman's fit, it's got to be Tillman, or do you think it's a bit more fluid than that? And I'll chuck out Hadji there as well. I know he's not 100% fit, but would you even expect to see him being involved at all at the weekend?
Yeah, maybe on the bench. Hopefully, I like Hadji, but hopefully he doesn't play on the best side. He's probably not fit. So I want to rush him into a massive game, and I would hope Tillman plays the 90, albeit that doesn't look likely just from the fact that he still isn't training. So if he's going to play, I doubt he plays a full part. But yeah, I think it's pretty simple. If Tillman's fit, he plays. If not, I guess Cantwell centrally. If you could also give Kent a free role and play two strikers in like a 4-3-1-2, sort of limit the width, but then you also lose the sort of efficacy of Sakala off the wing. But no, I think it's a pretty simple example. You play the guy who's in form and probably the best player in our team at current. So yeah, I think Tillman plays if fit.
Yeah, and look, before we go, I'll maybe just ask the pair of yous for a wee predicted lineup. I'll start with you first, Patrick. If everybody's fit, who are you picking?
Yeah, I mean, goalkeeper, I don't really care. Just it really doesn't matter at this point. Probably McGregor, just the fact that he still has the sort of shot stopping. For all his deficiencies, he is the one who's more likely to pull off the sort of fingertip in the 91st minute. And McLaughlin really has lost all ability outside of that, which is really sad. But so McGregor, I guess, Tav, Goldson, Davies, Barasic, quite kind of obvious. Then I would play in an ideal world, Kamara, Raskin, Tillman, then Sakala, Kent, and then Morelos up top.
That's interesting. And yourself, Andy, who would you be picking if everybody's fit, presumably?
McGregor definitely in goals. It's not a game for McLaughlin. You same back four as Patrick and every other Rangers fan on planet Earth, I would imagine. I would go with Raskin, Lundstrom and Tillman, with Kent, Sakala and Morelos. But I will add a wee thing onto that and say Roof off the bench for the winner.
Oh, honestly, I'd love absolutely nothing more than that. Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with your team there. I'd have McGregor in goals, normal back four. I'd have Lundstrom, Raskin, Sakala, Tillman, Kent, Morelos. Have I just agreed with Shug? Oh no, I think I have, hasn't I? I was saying that as I was and I was like, I think we need to. I think we've got
just resign. We'll resign.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some big questions we've got to ask ourselves here. But straight to the manager's office tomorrow morning, Andy, you and I. Look, I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. The battle fever is very much on the nerves. I'll start to kick in the next few days, I'm sure. As always, if you haven't already, just give us a like and subscribe, and it means you can get notified whenever we're going live. I believe this week we will do a wee special podcast at 8:30 on Friday, because it is a League Cup final. Cheers, Craig, that's hosting that one. And just want to say thanks to my guests. So thanks for joining us tonight, Andy.
Anytime, pleasure.
And Patrick, thanks for joining us as well.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cool. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you all again soon.